preparing to live stream the meeting.
Yeah, it is showing that it is live.
Just 1 second. Yeah. Namaste. Namaste and a very good morning, everyone. It is my sincere pleasure to welcome you to the second day of our International Deaf Week celebration, focused on inclusive education, a theme that reflects our commitment to equal opportunity for all. We are truly honored to have with us today Professor Asmita Huddar, a highly respected scholar and a leader in disability management and rehabilitation. She has also chaired the Board of Studies in Special Education at the University of Mumbai and played a key role in establishing the Center for Disability Studies and Disability Policies. Dr. Huddar is the principal of CCYM Hashu Advani College of Special Education, affiliated with University of Mumbai and accredited by NAC. Under her leadership, the college offers programs such as B.Ed in hearing impairment and B.Ed in learning disability, addressing diverse education needs. With over 3 decades of service, Dr. Huddar's contributions are transformative. She is the first Indian postdoctoral Fulbright scholar in the education of children with deafness, opening doors for a greater inclusion in India. Her values, such as collaboration, rationalism, and empathy, are reflected in her work and in the 13 students who have completed their master's and PhD in research under her mentorship. I am a first PhD student and proud to have her as a mentor. Her contributions to developing textbooks have shaped special education curricula at multiple universities. As we gather to hear Dr. Huddar's insights, let us remember that inclusive education is a shared responsibility, a continuous journey of understanding and action. It is an honor to welcome Dr. Asmita Huddar. Now, before we start our discussion on inclusive education, may I request our Director, Sir, Dr. Suman Kumar, Sir, to say a few words. Director, Sir. Director, Sir, your mic. Director, Sir, please unmute your mic. I think there is some technical glitch. So let's start with the Professor
Hello.
Asmita Putas. Yeah, okay, he's back.
Sorry, madam.
That's okay, sir.
Um, Good morning, everyone. On behalf of AYJNISD National Institute of Speech and Hearing Disabilities, Mumbai, I welcome Professor Asmita Hudar, madam. As our colleague has already introduced, madam, she is well known in inclusive education and bilingual education, and she has been part of us for a long time. And with her depth of knowledge, we would be getting great insight into inclusive education. And I expect this session to be very fruitful for everybody. And once again, madam, I wish you a happy International Week of the Day, week for the deaf. And we have planned a series of program, ma'am, and this is the second day we are celebrating in the series, and we have five more program scheduled in this week. So I request you to kindly proceed with your lecture, ma'am. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Suman Kumar.
Over to you, Imagine.
Thank you, Dr. Ahuja, for the wonderful introduction. I'll just screen share and let me know whether you can see my slides.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, good to go. So I am going to talk about, I'm calling it love triangle. Somebody can also call it Bermuda Triangle. There are three issues which are close to my heart and which are complexly interact with each other. So these are sign language, Indian Sign Language, inclusion, and literacy. So it's very interesting and very academic to look into how these three factors interact. What are our perceptions about it? Are there any false assumptions that we are nurturing? So rather than talking about purely inclusion in a very theoretical perspective, I feel let us talk about some pragmatic issues which are closer to Indian society. And hence, I'm going to quickly talk about the kind of relation ISL, inclusion, and literacy have. This PowerPoint is available on slideshare.com if anybody wants to use it. Thank you very much, Dr. Gayatri Ahuja, Dr. Suman Kumar. A special thanks to Ashish, who's interpreting, and of course, AYJNISD National Institute for the Speech and Hearing Disability. And of course, all the listeners, participants, and viewers. In the very beginning, we all know this is a very old quote, and I often quote it. I'm sure you must have read it many times. I take a pause, and I request Ashish also to take a pause. Let everybody read this. So what this quote says that the often found inadequate language among the deaf children has nothing to do with deafness as such. It is not inherent part of deafness. Then why is it there that we often see inadequate and in age appropriate language among the deaf children? I'm talking about Indian deaf children. So one of the reasons and the predominant reasons is the communication practices that we follow. So it is not about deafness itself, but how society, family, professionals respond to deafness is something very important. So that's just a reminder to all of us when we talk about anything to do with deafness. And of course, now we are going to link it with literacy and inclusion. Also, the plan of action is I am not going to talk about sign language. I'm not going to talk about literacy. And I'm not going to talk about inclusive education. What I want to focus is the interaction among the three factors. And as I said, do we have some incorrect assumptions over it? So this is the time we've had Indian Sign Language Day. We are celebrating inclusion in India currently. And of course, week for the persons with disability. So all this together, it is right time to look into the interactive domain of these three concepts. So the objective here is to revisit the general assumptions. And these assumptions is like my professional judgment, maybe more than 30 years, that how parents look at things, how professionals look at this issue of sign language, inclusion, and literacy. So I feel that there are two assumptions which are rather inappropriate. One is sign languages are barriers for inclusive education. There's a common understanding that families, professionals, community, society, experts, policymakers may have or at risk of having this assumption where we feel that, oh, okay, if we introduce sign language to the family for the deaf child, then what will happen to inclusive education? Inclusive education may not work if we expose the child to sign language. That's the feeling I feel is very common. And I'm sure newly trained special educators and those who are undergoing B.Ed programs currently are viewing this. And this is the time to undo incorrect assumptions, maybe before they are consolidated and concrete in our thought processes. So the second thing I want to address is sign languages are barrier for literacy development. This again is a very, very common statement. I know many people, including of course families, lay persons, professionals, who feel sign language is okay. I am okay with sign language, quote unquote. But what about literacy? So if we want age appropriate, two adjectives I'll be using here. If we want age appropriate and adequate literacy level, then we have to stay away from sign language. Obviously, it indicates that we have to work on listening and speaking more with the focus. So here, let's dive little deep and see what these two statements really mean. And I don't have much statistics and research to support what I'm saying, but it is a kind of a summary of recent research that I have been reading and thinking about it. And of course, there is also my professional judgment. So ये दो जो sentences है जो हम मान के चले हैं कि जब समावेशित शिक्षा की बात होती है तो सांकेतिक भाषा उसमें रुकावट होती है, और जब साक्षरता विकास की बात होती है तो भी साइन लैंग्वेज का प्रयोग उसमें रुकावट होती है. तो आज हम देखेंगे कि क्या ये दो स्टेटमेंट्स सही है या उसमें कुछ छिपा हुआ मीनिंग है जो हमारे लिए जानना जरूरी है. और इसीलिए मैंने कहा है कि समावेशित शिक्षा, साक्षरता विकास और सांकेतिक भाषा, इन तीनों का आपस में क्या संबंध है वो हम देखेंगे. So to begin with, we have to challenge the premise. We have to challenge the way we think. अगर हम ऐसा सोचते हैं कि साइन लैंग्वेज इज अ बैरियर फॉर इंक्लूसिव एजुकेशन, हमें उसको चैलेंज करना होगा, रिव्यू करना. आफ्टर दैट वॉट एवर इज योर टेक ऑन इट, आप जो भी उसके बारे में सोचिए, बट एटलीस्ट इट हैज टू हैव अ बैकअप ऑफ व्हाट लिटरेचर सेज, वन, एंड व्हाट वी गेट टू सी अराउंड अस. तो थोड़ा थियोरी भी होना चाहिए और थोड़ा प्रैग्मेटिकली आजू बाजू में क्या हो रहा है उसका भी अवेयरनेस होना चाहिए. सो लेट अस take this statement that one option, into bracket maybe oral option here. So one option facilitates inclusion and the other, that is manual, is a barrier for it. So predominantly अगर हमने कहा दो options है, there is listening and speaking, as we all know. I don't want to go into details. Listening and speaking, oralism, and use of sign language, bilingualism. If we have these two options, there's a general assumption that oralism is a road to inclusion and sign language is a barrier for inclusive education. इंक्लूसिव एजुकेशन को भी हम बहुत नैरो पॉइंट ऑफ व्यू से यहाँ देखेंगे. हम सिर्फ कहेंगे मेन स्ट्रीम स्कूल में बच्चों का जाना, इतना ही हम अभी अगर इंक्लूसिव, जो सही नहीं है, बट इतना ही अगर हम मान के चले इज इंक्लूजन, then there is a general assumption that oralism will help and sign language may not help. Now, what I feel, and you can do review of literature, that this one main assumption is a total of several sub-assumptions. Yeah, Dr. Ahuja, you want to say something?
Yeah. Sorry, ma'am, to interrupt. Ma'am, please increase your volume because my interpreter is having certain concern.
Oh, okay. Should I check my you can hear me now? Or you want me to check my device volume?
No. Ma'am, just 1 second. Let him increase his.
Ashish, can you hear me now?
Yeah, okay.
Oh, or maybe you can also check your device volume. Good to go, Ashish? Okay, but you stop me again if you find it difficult. Let's just resolve this issue. Okay, sorry for that. So what I'm trying to say is, अगर ये एक general assumption है, there are sub-assumptions because of which we feel like this. You can read the statement. So it is the total of some smaller assumptions. So this assumption can be broken down into several assumptions. We can review these sub-assumptions to be able to verify the given assumption. ये जो हम मान के चल रहे हैं, उसको हम छोटे छोटे टुकड़ों में विभाजित करेंगे और देखेंगे कि क्यों हमें लगता है, अगर हमें ऐसा लगता है तो. And of course, at the end, I will definitely share my conclusions. आखिर में मैं बताना चाहती हूँ कि मेरे निष्कर्ष क्या है. आप अग्री होंगे, डिसअग्री होंगे, whatever it is, but it is time we talk about it. It is time we change the narrative to look at these issues. Because ये तीनों जो issues है, literacy, inclusion, and use of Indian Sign Language, are very core issues in our field. So I want you to read this. And I want Ashish also to take a pause and let the readers read it. So what do we think about it? That all orally raised students with hearing losses are fluent and age appropriate in their verbal communication. Just read this, process this, and tell yourself what is your opinion about it. I have no doubts that we all have similar opinion, similar judgment. Okay, so this is first. Second, sub assumption is success of inclusion solely depends upon verbal skills of students with deafness. समावेशित शिक्षा की सफलता पूरी तरह से डेफ बालक के मौखिक कौशल्य पर आधारित है. That's the main important and only factor that leads to successful inclusion. Process this. सोचिए इसके बारे में और क्या लगता है आपको? Tell yourself. Third sub-assumption is, and I am sure you understand the word assumption. Assumption मतलब उसके लिए कोई evidence नहीं है. ये truth हो सकता है, नहीं हो सकता है. ऐसा हम मान के चल रहे हैं. So the third one is, I want you to read. Ashish, you can take a pause. The third one says that if we have two options, oralism and educational bilingualism, those children who are orally raised, they naturally, organically get access to communication in a mainstream class. मतलब जब मुख्य धारा की पाठशाला में मौखिक तरह से सिखाया गया बच्चा प्रवेशित होता है तो अपने आप वहां का कम्युनिकेशन वो मैनेज कर लेता है. सोचिए क्या ऐसा होता है, होता होगा? Take a pause and think. The fourth point that we often think about is normal hearing classmates are more comfortable with verbal communication with students with deafness than that with signed communication. जो हियरिंग टिपिकली डेवलपिंग पीयर है क्लास में, जो बच्चे हैं अबाधित बच्चे, उनको डेफ बच्चों का स्पीच ज्यादा प्रिफर करते होंगे, कंफर्टेबल करते होंगे रादर देन साइनिंग. कितने रेडी होते हैं हियरिंग पीयर्स फॉर द kind of verbal communication that deaf child has as against the signing that a deaf child may be doing. And lastly, I want you to think about speaking is the only form accepted by hearing peers. ऐसा आपको लगता है क्या कि जो typically developing normal hearing classmates है उनको ऐसा लगता होगा कि हम साइन लैंग्वेज को एक्सेप्ट नहीं करेंगे, आप बोलेंगे तो ही हम आपसे दोस्ती करेंगे? डू यू थिंक हियरिंग पीयर्स थिंक लाइक दैट? सो मुझे लगता है ये छोटे छोटे चीजों को हम समझ लेंगे तो बड़ा पिक्चर हमको नजर आएगा जिसमें हम देख सकेंगे कि इंक्लूजन एंड इंडियन साइन लैंग्वेज का आपस में क्या संबंध है. So now if you ask me, I totally reject, and this is my, again as I said, जितना भी मैंने लिटरेचर पढ़ा है एंड जितना भी मेरा प्रोफेशनल जजमेंट है, इंटरैक्शंस होते रहते हैं, उसके आधार पर I myself personally want to reject all these assumptions. एंड इसीलिए मुझे ऐसा लगता है कि यूज ऑफ साइन लैंग्वेज इज नॉट अ बैरियर टू इंक्लूसिव एजुकेशन. सांकेतिक भाषा का प्रयोग करना मतलब सर्वसमावेशित शिक्षा के दरवाजे बंद होना, ये सोच सही नहीं है, ऐसा मैं मानती हूं. मैं अगेन आपको कहना चाहती हूं कि मैं ऐसा भी नहीं कह रही हूं दूसरी ओर कि साइन लैंग्वेज एक्सपोज करो तो इंक्लूसिव एजुकेशन आसान हो जाएगा, नहीं। और ना मैं यहाँ ओरलिज्म और एजुकेशनल बाइलिंगुअलिज्म की कंपटीशन लगा रही हूँ, और ना मैं कह रही हूँ कि एक ज्यादा बेहतर है और दूसरा नहीं है। आई एम जस्ट सेइंग whatever the families select with the help of the professionals should not be on the basis of incorrect assumptions. मैं सिर्फ इतना कह रही हूं कि जो भी परिवार सिलेक्ट करे, whether that is oralism or educational bilingualism or whatever options available in education, उसका आधार गलत ना हो, गलत आधार पे सिलेक्शन ना हो, is my only concern. So ISL and inclusion, are they contrasting or are they complementary? So there is a general statement which says choose oralism for the families of the deaf children if you want inclusive education. And I have an objection to this statement. मैं ये सही नहीं मानती हूँ और ये गलत दिशा में सोचना हो गया, ऐसा मैं मानती हूँ। Because inclusion is respecting and accepting diversity under one roof. Inclusion का एक लाइन में मतलब ही ये है कि हम एक छत के नीचे विविधता को सम्मानित करें और उसको स्वीकार करें। अगर ये है समावेशित शिक्षा, तो हम कैसे कह पाएंगे कि कोई मुंह से बोलता है वो एक्सेप्ट हो जाएगा, उसका स्वीकार हो जाएगा, और कोई मैन्युअली बात करता है तो उसको अस्वीकार आ जाएगा। This is not the essence of inclusive education. So can rejection of ISL be assumed in an inclusive school? No. I hope I'm making it very clear, and I'll quickly take maybe 5 to 7 minutes more, and then we can open the forum for discussion. So my personal conclusions are, there are several challenges involved when a family chooses inclusive education. And there are several challenges involved when a family chooses ISL. And there are several challenges involved when a family chooses ISL in inclusive setup. So this is not a bed of roses, मतलब ये केक वॉक तो होगा नहीं, बट किसी ऑप्शन के लिए वो है नहीं. There are challenges, there are red flags in all the options. But ISL and inclusive schooling are not barriers for each other. दोनों एक दूसरे के लिए रुकावट नहीं है. कितनी सफलता मिलेगी वो तो बहुत, जैसे हम सब जानते हैं, कितनी सफलता मिलेगी ये तो बहुत घटकों पर निर्भर है. तो एक को मान के चलना कि इसकी वजह से सर्वसमावेशित शिक्षा असफल रहेगी, ये गलत धारणा है. So now coming, so on professional level, I am rejecting the first assumption that we started on. And the second one is, of course, sign languages are barriers for literacy development. ये तो डिबेट का इशू आज है ही नहीं. If you read research and see what the recent literature says and what experiments at the developed countries have worked, then ये discussion का issue है ही नहीं. But फिर भी, today also, there are families, community professionals, special educators, paraprofessionals, policy makers. They nurture this line of thinking that sign languages are barrier for literacy. Again, they say, सांकेतिक भाषा तो ठीक है, पर साक्षरता विकास का क्या? सांकेतिक भाषा का प्रयोग करने के वजह से साक्षरता विकसित नहीं की जा सकती है, ऐसा मानने वाले बहुत सारे लोग हैं. इसीलिए इस पे भी बात करना जरूरी है. Is speech a prerequisite for literacy development? क्या ये प्री कंडीशन है कि लिसनिंग एंड स्पीकिंग जरूरी है, आवश्यक है, प्री कंडीशन है फॉर लिटरेसी डेवलपमेंट? इट इज अ वेरी कॉम्प्लेक्स इशू. उसको ओवर सिंप्लीफाई जनरलाइज करना सही नहीं है. इट इज रियली अ डिबेट दैट कैन गो ऑन फॉर कपल ऑफ डेज. बट अभी 5-10 मिनट में अगर वाइंड अप करना है और कुछ टेक लेना है, एक स्टैंड लेना है, इस तरह या इस तरह एक बोल्ड स्टेटमेंट बनाना है, तो इट इज अ कॉम्प्लेक्स इशू. यट इफ अ बाइनरी रिस्पॉन्स आप मुझे गन पॉइंट पे पूछेंगे कि बताओ स्पीच इज अ प्री रिक्विजिट फॉर लिटरेसी डेवलपमेंट, यस और नो, तो माई आंसर विल बी नो. इट इज important. Speech is important for literacy development. See the word important, but not essential. It is not a prerequisite. So speech is not a prerequisite for literacy development. Again, I don't want to go into theory. I'm sure you all know. So these are the prerequisites of literacy development. हमने सबने पढ़ा है कि साक्षरता विकास के प्री कंडीशंस क्या होते हैं. And उसमें what is important is language. Somehow all the time we focus either on speech or signs and the debate. And इस डिबेट में नुकसान होता है, एक फोकस रह जाता है, and that is language. Inner language that we keep on processing. Either speech or signs are tools to express. So I personally feel that fear that we have, that using sign language, it will create problems in literacy development, is again an incorrect assumption. ये गलत धारणा है. Is speech a prerequisite for literacy development? यहाँ पे हमें speech, language and literacy तीनों को expressive and receptive दोनों डायमेंशन से देखना है. अगर हम देखें तो हमें समझ में आएगा कि adequate age appropriate language foundation is a prerequisite. And if we understand the difference between language and speech, we will understand why I'm emphasizing that it is language which is a prerequisite and may not be speech. Speech is a facilitator of literacy development. This is 100% sure. Nothing against speech or oralism. Again, I'm making myself clear. There's no competition. And there is no choosing one over the other. And there is no criticizing one over the other. It is just rational, balanced understanding of the issue. So yes, speech is a facilitator. How we of literacy development. हम सब ने literacy कैसे सीखी है? All those are typically functioning hearing individuals. We all have learned literacy through speech and listening. So yes, it is important. It facilitates literacy. Particularly if you remember preschool में कैसे grapheme phoneme relation पे काम होता है. So there is no denying that. Yet, we should understand that that's not the only way. That speech is not the only prerequisite that will lead us to literacy. साक्षरता विकास के लिए केवल वाणी और श्रवण यही एक मार्ग नहीं है. Why does speech appear to be a prerequisite? ऐसा हमें क्यों लगता है? वो लगने में भी एक रैशनल है. Because majority हम लोगों ने ऐसा ही साक्षरता विकास पाया है जो लिसनिंग एंड स्पीकिंग के थ्रू गया है. So support areas to indicate, I think I can skip this. There's so much research on how we acquire literacy using sign language. There's ocean of literature on that. I wanted to summarize it, but I don't think that fits into the time frame that we have. But at least look at this as an opportunity to challenge your thinking. अभी तक की जो आपके assumptions and सोच रही है, अगर वो ऐसी रही है, तो सिर्फ चैलेंज तो करके देखिए कि क्या आपकी सोच सही है या नहीं. So if you ask me, is ISL a barrier to literacy and inclusive education? जैसे मैंने कहा, बहुत complex issue है. It is really not a good way to answer in one word. But अगर आपने कॉलर पकड़ ही ली मेरी और पूछ ही लिया कि नहीं नहीं एक जवाब दो, yes and no, yes or no, तो I think I will say no. Communicative opportunities need to be chosen carefully for each of the families. ये बहुत घिसा पिटा स्टेटमेंट है, जो भी मेरे स्टूडेंट रहे हैं फॉर द लास्ट 35-36 years, उनको पक्का पता है कि ये मेरा हमेशा का स्टैंड रहा है, that the families will select the communication opportunities with the help of the professionals, but that selection and that faith and the trust in the chosen communicative option cannot be on the basis of false assumption. I'm happy अगर किसी ने oralism select किया and if that works with the child. And I'm happy if somebody chooses educational bilingualism and that works with the child and the family. So there are challenges, concerns, and red flags in each of the options. And that I think we all know very well. कोई भी ऐसा श्योर शॉट गुरु किल्ली बोलते हैं ना, की टू सक्सेस, एक शॉट में, एक जवाब में पूरी सफलता, ऐसा कुछ है ही नहीं. So we all have to dive deep and debate about it. So I wind up, I'm sorry, I took, I think 7 to 8 minutes more. But if Dr. Ahuja allows us, अगर कुछ questions है तो हम ले सकते हैं. So how do we get the questions now?
Some people are posing their questions on my personal WhatsApp and some on YouTube. So I have one question from Ambuj stating that, in your view, what role does government policy play in ensuring that sign language is recognized and incorporated into education systems?
Yeah, a good question. Definitely, it is like हम कहते हैं ना, टॉप डाउन एंड बॉटम अप, इंटरैक्टिव. जो भी अच्छी चीज देश में होनी है इन टर्म्स ऑफ वॉट एवर, ऊपर से भी पुश होना चाहिए और नीचे से भी पुश होना चाहिए. ऊपर से मतलब अथॉरिटीज, गवर्नमेंट, लॉज, लेजिस्लेटिव फ्रेमवर्क, systems for litigation, ऑल ये हम कहेंगे कि टॉप लेवल की चीजें हैं. वो भी आवश्यक है, इसेंशियल है. बट व्हाट डू वी ले पर्सन्स हैव अ रोल टू प्ले, दैट इज मोर इम्पॉर्टेंट. हम बॉटम लेवल पे है. इम्प्लीमेंटेशन एंड सही इम्प्लीमेंटेशन आई थिंक इज इन आवर हैंड्स. डॉक्यूमेंट्स है, पॉलिसीज है, they are there on the websites, they are there in the library. But our role is to be aware and alert to implement. And third most important is to know अगर implement नहीं होता है तो करना क्या है. So I feel yes, policies are important, but my role in understanding the policies is more important than anything else. I hope I responded to the question.
Yeah. One more question. Just wait one second. Yeah. So this person is asking that what steps the university should be taking for making higher education more accessible for students with deafness.
Wow, this is so nice. And this is my favorite area of work, and currently that's what I'm working on, is making higher education system more inclusive, more ready for, first I will say diversity, any type of diversity, then ready for disability, and of course ready for individuals with deafness, or I would say hearing loss of any degree. So there are many things. One, first of all, UGC guidelines are there. It is mandatory for all universities and colleges to have disability policy, disability committee, and a center where all the material related to reservation, concessions, exemptions, and facilities. Reservations, concessions, exemptions, and facilities is available. So it is mandatory by UGC. It is recognized by various, of course, Rehabilitation Council of India is there, RPWD Act is there, which supports all this. But with the focus on higher education, it is UGC and NAC, National Accreditation and Assessment Council. They have highlighted many measures that can be taken by colleges. And obviously, the focus is all disabilities, but individuals with deafness will also benefit. So it is about knowing the exemptions, concessions, facilities, and reservations and implementing those. And most importantly, the faculty which is sensitized to address the learning needs of the deaf individuals is very important. For that, we do not need any GR, any circular, any policy. As a teacher, I should feel that there is somebody in my class who needs to sit in front, who needs to sit away from the noisy area, who needs notes prior, who needs visual input. For all this, I think it is the attitude of the faculty members and teachers which we are currently training. That is what matters. I think सबसे important जो चीज है वो सबसे सस्ती है. I often say that कि आपको रैंप लगाना है, you need fund. आपको exemptions देने हैं, you need GR and circular, right? And आपको infrastructure बनाना है, you need funding, CSR, resources and all. ठीक है, ये सब चाहिए. But सबसे जो जरूरी चीज है वो एकदम फ्री है, and that is positive, proactive mindset. Being open to the needs of our students. आप स्कूल में हो, कॉलेज में हो, जहां पे भी हो, आप में वो अर्ज है कि I have to reach out to each and every student. Then it is not a rocket science. Teachers figure out. जमता है, कर लेते हैं.
Ma'am, one more question. This person is asking about, do you know any success stories where sign language is used in an educational setting which led to the positive outcomes?
Success story in terms of family or in terms of school or in terms of program? Not too sure. I know there are lesser success stories using educational bilingualism, but they do exist. And I can think of at least 5 to 6 names. But for today's session, I have decided myself to not take any brand names, either this way or that way, because उससे focus चला जाता है. But एक बात मैं पक्का बता दूं कि जितने हमारे पास ओरल सक्सेस स्टोरीज हैं, वैसे ही एजुकेशनल बाइलिंगुअलिज्म के सक्सेस स्टोरीज है. बट वी हैव टू गिव क्रेडिट टू द पॉइंट दैट एजुकेशनल बाइलिंगुअलिज्म इंडिया में एक्सेप्ट होने की हिस्ट्री बहुत पुरानी नहीं है. So, preschools and early intervention centers with educational bilingualism अभी तक हमारे यहाँ established ज़्यादा अच्छी तरह से हुए नहीं. But yes, there are success stories. There definitely are.
Now, this question is, with your vast experience, 30 years or more than 30 years of experience.
आवाज गई.
आवाज नहीं? Okay. with your vast experience, I guess more than 30 years of experience. Yeah. So, according to you, your personal view, what are the main barriers to the widespread acceptance of sign language as an official language in education, and how we can overcome them?
I don't know. If you ask me in one word, it is mindset.
Okay.
It is, there are so many, I don't know whether you are aware, but there are so many biases. Scientifically, if you study how we think, there are so many biases that are present in every human being. Nobody can claim ki, मैं तो bias हूँ ही नहीं. Everybody is little or more biased about something or the other. So I feel that some incorrect assumptions and biases that we have, we means whole country or the whole world I'm talking about. Whether you are a lay person, you have nothing to do with ISL, you don't know what ISL is. From that to the professionals, families, deaf community, deaf leaders, policy makers, higher level decision makers, people may have biases, and we will have to have a system where we deal with it, we acknowledge it, we agree that yes, I may have a bias, let me check. So I feel evidence based practice की जब हमें आदत हो जाएगी तब बहुत फर्क आएगा. That is why I keep on talking about scientific temperament and rationalism, which are very important values, and and those are why my values as well, where I feel कितना हम ज्यादा से ज्यादा अपने आप को रैशनलिज्म की तरफ, एविडेंस बेस्ड अंडरस्टैंडिंग की तरफ ले जाए उतना बेटर है. सो कोई भी चीज जो है आज हमें गलत लग रही है, उसका मुझे लगता है वे फॉरवर्ड इज टू give orientation to masses, have positive perspective, and also somewhere I feel we have to use the new media to spread the word. That is untapped so far I feel. ये जो social media है, including क्या कहते हैं entertainment media जो है, Bollywood, OTT platforms and all, everywhere we will see the difference when issues related to disability, deafness, and Indian Sign Language become more and more common. People will become aware.
Thank you, ma'am. These many questions so far. Maybe when they start watching the YouTube, we'll have more questions. So let's see. So as we conclude today's session, I would like to extend my heartfelt thanks to Professor Asmita Huddar for her valuable insights on inclusive education. Your expertise has greatly enriched our understanding on accessibility, especially the mindset in education setup. A special thank you to Mr. Ashish for his excellent sign language interpretation, which ensured our message was clear and inclusive for all. Thank you, Ashish. Thank you for all the participations which was there in the YouTube channel, and those who are posing questions personally on my WhatsApp. Thank you. Let's continue to work towards a more inclusive world. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you, Ashish. Sorry for being a little faster in between, but then I was learning that skill, to be a little slower in my communication. So thank you, Ashish. Thank you, Dr. Ahuja. Thank you, Dr. Suman Kumar.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you so much. This week.